at this point, I want to bring in Don Deya, who is the CEO of the Pan-African Lawyers Union, but also serves as the chair of the Stop the Bleeding campaign. In your experience, Don, we had, of course, the Mbeki high-level panel report on illicit financial flows, both a very political document, but also a very technical document that sort of illustrated the back of the queue, as it were, that the continent is placed when it comes to issues of architectural issues. Is there something, or is there momentum that we can take from what Professor Olekushi has said, using the Mbeki panel report, for example, to try and re-energize this conversation around the African financial architecture, but also, as Dr. Mangani had mentioned in his keynote, reinvigorating the Lagos plan, as it were, but maybe a Lagos plan 2.0. This is assuming that Lagos 1.0 didn't actually work.
And in terms of answering you, I think I just go back to what we, as the 7 members of the Stop the Bleeding Consortium, decided was going to be our motto for the year, which you very kindly, have highlighted in your program on concept note, that Sisi ndio tuko. Sisi ndio tuko is Swahili for saying, we are the ones who are there. We are the ones we've been waiting for. There's nobody else. Nobody else is going to do this work. So I think for me, that is the one thing that I would take and turn around and say, especially responding to the keynote in the morning, and also to Bayo Lukoshi, and of course also to Lakester, who has just more or less emphasized it. This thing we're calling African financial architecture, how quickly can we make it work? At the core of the African financial architecture, and Bayo said it, are 4 institutions. 4 potential institutions: the African Investment Bank, the African Monetary Fund, the African Monetary Institute as a precursor to the fund, and the African Central Bank. For all of these proposed bodies, the legal instruments, the protocols creating them, were adopted between 2010 and 2012. 10 years later, they have not achieved the necessary ratifications from the member states to go into force. Yet we know that there'll be a game changer, not just in terms of mobilizing resources for the continent, but creating a different policy paradigm that will confront global financial architecture, that will articulate the position of Africans and African states and African peoples in this context. So I think the challenge to us from AFCOD 2, bearing in mind that Sisi ndio tuko, is to ensure that we ourselves, the people in this room, by the time we're meeting in another part of Africa, 12 months from now, for AFCOD 3, we have ensured that our states have ratified these instruments, because there's no logical reason why they haven't. 2, when we're talking of African financial architecture, and for me, these are the ways we can help implement the various 38 recommendations of the Mbeki panel report, many of which were reiterated at the global level in the UN Factory report, is to adopt a slightly broader view of African financial architecture beyond those 4 core institutions. So let's bear in mind that in terms of a sovereign fund platform, we have Africa Risk Capacity. It's a specialized agency of the AU. It's in force. It's in Joburg. In terms of different ways of different models of resource mobilization, domestic resource mobilization, and continental resource mobilizations, we've got a couple of trust funds at the AU. The African Union Foundation. We've got also the Legal Aid Fund for the African Human Rights Institutions. And we also have the African Institute for Remittances, which should not only help African states and African peoples facilitate remittances from different parts of Africa and different parts of the world, but should also be a policy factory. So let's add this to our view of the financial architecture. Then, because financial integrity is an issue, on an outer layer, look at the institutions we have at the continental level that help us pursue financial integrity in the 55 countries, in the 5 regions, and so on. So we have the African Union Advisory Board Against Corruption, but we also have the African Peer Review Mechanism with its economic governance pillar and also the social governance pillar. And finally, we also have the African Court on Human and People's Rights and Justice, the future African court that would give the continent an international criminal jurisdiction. Because at the core of it, we have put a number of economic crimes. We have put in place a potential for Africa to be able to confront, especially the multinational corporations that are at the heart of our IFFs. There's corporate criminal liability, and there are discrete crimes of corruption, money laundering, and illicit exploitation of natural resources of Africa. So if we have this view of African financial architecture, bearing in mind that Sisi ndio tuko, we can really create a disruption, a positive disruption that can shift our paradigms and shift how the world engages with us in reasonable time. Sisi ndio tuko.
We call for policies and practices that put people first. We call for policies and practices that put people first.